At exactly 6 o'clock on Christmas Day, my phone received 23 calls in under 10 minutes. I know because I counted them later. At the time, I was sitting by a window in a quiet Vermont cabin, holding a hot cup of coffee, watching snow drift across the hillside, my dog asleep by the fire. Then my phone lit up my ex-wife, my son, my daughter, all trying to reach me at once. Here's the strange part. I wasn't confused. I wasn't worried. I knew exactly when those calls would start, because for the first time in 15 years, I hadn't paid for a single thing. And by 6 o'clock, my family was standing in an Aspen parking lot finding out exactly what that meant. At exactly 6 o'clock on Christmas Day, my phone received 22 calls in under 10 minutes. I know because I counted them later. At the time, I was sitting by a window holding a hot cup of coffee, watching fresh snow drift across a quiet Vermont hillside. The only sounds in the cabin were the crackle of the fireplace and my dog snoring beside me. Then my phone lit up. One call, then another, then three more. A flood of texts followed so fast the screen barely stopped vibrating. My ex-wife, my son, my daughter, all trying to reach me at once. The strange part wasn't that they were calling. The strange part was that I knew exactly when those calls would start. Have you ever been blamed for everything, even when you're the one footing the bill? For 14 straight Christmases, I paid for every holiday gathering my family expected: the cabins, the food, the gifts, the extras nobody remembers until the bill shows up. And somehow, I was always the problem. This Christmas, I decided to stop doing one thing. And at 6 o'clock that evening, the consequences finally arrived. The tradition that never died, my ex-wife Renee and I divorced 14 years ago. The marriage ended, but one tradition refused to die: Christmas. When our kids, Colin and Maya, were younger, I understood why keeping it alive mattered. I didn't want them bouncing between two households during the holidays. So when Renee suggested renting a cabin in Aspen that first year, I agreed. It was actually nice at first. We spent time together. The kids laughed. Nobody argued about custody schedules. For a few days, it felt like a family again. But over the years, it stopped being about togetherness and started being about expectations. The cabins got bigger. The catering got fancier. The gift lists got longer. One year, Colin wanted designer sneakers. The next, electronics, then watches. Then things I couldn't even pronounce. Maya wasn't much different. Every year came with a new set of upgrades, special requests, special experiences. Even Renee had opinions about everything. The view wasn't good enough, the menu needed more options, the decorations needed to look more expensive. Every year there was another cost waiting around the corner. Every year I paid it. Not because anyone thanked me, because I thought keeping the peace was worth it. The strange thing wasn't how much I spent. It was how little appreciation came with it. If the weather was too cold, I heard about it. If a reservation wasn't perfect, somehow that became my fault too. I could spend thousands creating the holiday they wanted, and within hours someone would find a reason to complain. Eventually, I noticed something impossible to ignore. Nobody ever asked how I was doing. Nobody asked if I wanted these trips, or if I could even afford another one. They only wanted to know one thing. Was everything paid for? They weren't excited to see me. They were excited to see what I was paying for. The broken watch last Christmas, I spent a little over $8,000: the cabin, the catering, the gifts, all the extras nobody thinks about until the invoice arrives. I wasn't even upset about the money. I just wanted to see them enjoy themselves. For a few hours, it looked like maybe it would go well. After dinner, Colin opened his gift, a designer watch he'd specifically requested. He smiled for about 5 minutes. Then he started pressing buttons, checking the display, and his expression changed. "Dad, what's wrong with this thing? What do you mean?" It stopped working. I figured it was a simple setting issue, a battery. Maybe, but he reacted like the watch had exploded. You spent all this money and couldn't make sure it worked. The room went quiet. I tried explaining we could contact the retailer after the holiday. That only made him angrier. Renee jumped in before I could finish. Honestly, this is exactly the kind of thing you do. What does that even mean? You always cut corners somewhere. Cut corner. After spending thousands on a trip I hadn't even asked for. Before I could respond, Maya added her own line. It's like you always find a way to mess something up. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were new, but because they were familiar. I'd heard versions of them for years. The difference was that something inside me finally stopped making excuses for them. I looked around the room, the plates, the glasses, the catered food, the gifts under the tree. Every single thing had been paid for by me. And yet I sat there feeling like an unwanted guest, not a father. A man expected to cover the bill. Later that night, while everyone laughed upstairs, I sat alone downstairs and asked myself a different question than usual. Not how do I make next Christmas better? Instead, what would happen if I stopped paying for it? The answer came almost immediately. Next year, they'd get exactly what they paid for. Silence in the group chat. By October, I'd almost forgotten the promise I made myself that night. Almost, then the family group chat came back to life. The way it always did, a few messages about dates, a couple of suggestions, and before long, everyone was planning a Christmas trip they had no intention of paying for. Renee sent a link to a luxury cabin in Aspen. Looks perfect for this year. Not what do you think. Not can we afford this. Just an assumption the tradition would continue exactly as always. A few days later, Colin started sending links, designer clothes, electronics, accessories. Every message felt less like a suggestion and more like an order form. Maya wanted details about the catering. Could they get the same company as last year? Could they add more dessert options? Nobody discussed who would actually be paying for any of it. In their minds, that question had already been answered. The old version of me would have pushed back, argued, complained about the cost. This time, I did none of that. I just stayed quiet. Days passed. Weeks passed. Nobody noticed my silence, or if they did, they assumed I was handling everything the way I always had. Nobody sent a message asking if I was okay with it. Nobody asked if I'd made the reservation or paid the deposit. For 14 years, I'd trained them to expect it. Now I was watching that expectation operate all by itself. Reminder emails started arriving in December. The rental company wanted payment. The caterer wanted confirmation. Final balances were due. I read every one. Then I closed it. No response. No payment. Meanwhile, while everyone else planned the Christmas they expected me to fund, I quietly made plans of my own. Unlike Aspen, this reservation would actually get paid. Vermont, a week before Christmas, I packed my truck, loaded my dog Bruno into the passenger seat, and headed north, not to Aspen, not to a luxury resort, but to a small town in Vermont. The cabin I rented wasn't impressive by anyone else's standards. 1 bedroom, a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, a view of snow-covered hills. That was more than enough. For the first time in years, I booked a Christmas trip based on what I wanted. The first day felt strange. I kept waiting for a complaint, a demand, some problem that would somehow become my responsibility. Instead, there was only silence. Good silence. The kind that lets you hear the wind outside. The kind that reminds you how exhausting constant criticism can be. Bruno slept by the fire. I read, walked through the snow, and enjoyed the fact that nobody was asking me to fix anything. After a while, I realized something surprising. I wasn't missing the Aspen trips at all. I was only missing the idea of what I'd wished they could have been. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and clear skies. It was the most relaxed Christmas I'd had in over a decade. But throughout the day, I kept glancing at my phone, not out of worry, but because I knew exactly when reality was scheduled to arrive. 6 p.m., I knew the schedule by heart. They always arrived in Aspen by late afternoon, checked in around 6, dinner served shortly after. 14 years, same pattern. This year would be different. The only question was how long it would take them to notice. At exactly 6, my phone lit up. Renee's name first. It rang, then stopped. 5 seconds later, she called again. Before that call ended, Colin's name appeared. Then, Maya's. Then, Renee again. Within minutes, my screen looked like an emergency alert. I set my coffee down and looked at the growing list. Right on schedule. Renee's first text, call me now. The second, where are you? Colin's message came in capital letters and frustration. Maya's texts moved from confused to worried to panicked. I finally opened a voicemail. The picture became clear immediately. The cabin management company had refused entry. The final balance had never been paid. No payment, no reservation, no keys. Around the same time, they learned the catering company had canceled the dinner too. Deposit deadline, passed weeks earlier. No payment, no caterer, no feast. Just a parking lot, some suitcases, and a reality nobody expected. The messages got more desperate. Renee wanted answers. Colin wanted someone to blame. Maya wanted a solution. What struck me most was that every message assumed the same thing, that I would fix it. Even now. Even after months of silence. Even after not confirming a single reservation, their first instinct wasn't to solve it themselves. It was to call me. For years, I'd rescued every holiday crisis before it became visible. This time, there was nothing to rescue, only consequences. I could have answered right away. I could have found another cabin, another dinner, some last-minute fix. That's exactly what the old version of me would have done. Instead, I stood up, poured myself fresh coffee, and returned to the window. Outside, snow drifted quietly across the hillside. Inside, my phone kept vibrating on the table. Call, text, voicemail, call, text, voicemail. For once, I didn't rush to fix anything. I just sat there and listened to the silence between notifications. Because sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. I was never ruining Christmas. After nearly an hour of calls, I finally answered. Renee started immediately. David, where are you? What's going on? Why aren't we in the cabin? Colin cut in from somewhere nearby. This is ridiculous. The rental company says there's no reservation. Maya sounded exhausted. Dad, can you please tell us what's happening? For a moment, I just listened. Not because I was confused, because it was the first time all day they'd sounded genuinely interested in hearing from me. When the noise settled, I asked a simple question. Did any of you pay for the cabin? Silence. Did any of you pay the catering company? More silence. Then Renee said, that's not the point. I almost laughed, because that was exactly the point. I took a sip of coffee and gave the only answer I felt they deserved. I thought whoever booked it paid for it. Complete silence. For the first time in years, nobody had a comeback. Nobody had a criticism ready. Because we all knew the truth, none of them had expected to pay. They'd expected me to. I was never ruining Christmas, I said. Nobody interrupted. I was financing it. The words hung there. 14 years of frustration packed into one sentence. I explained how every holiday had become less about family and more about expectations. How every year came with a bigger bill and less appreciation. How tired I was of being treated like the problem while paying for everyone else's perfect holiday. The call ended the way you'd expect. Nobody apologized. A few harsh words got exchanged, and then it disconnected. But even though the conversation ended badly, something important had changed. For the first time in 14 years, the responsibility wasn't sitting on my shoulders anymore. What came after the days after Christmas were quiet. At first, the messages weren't much different from the call's anger. A few attempts at guilt. According to Colin, I'd embarrassed the family. According to Renee, I'd created unnecessary drama. Maya mostly stayed out of the arguments, though she checked in once or twice to see how I was doing. That alone felt different. For once, someone was asking about me instead of asking me to pay for something. As the weeks passed, the shock wore off and reality settled in. The Aspen trip hadn't fallen apart because I ruined it. It fell apart because nobody took responsibility for it. That distinction mattered, whether they wanted to admit it or not. The following year, nobody sent links to luxury cabins. Nobody forwarded expensive menus. Nobody assumed I was covering every cost. The expectation had finally broken. Some relationships became more distant. I won't pretend otherwise. A few conversations grew shorter. A few traditions quietly disappeared. But something unexpected happened too. The interactions that remained started feeling more genuine. When my kids called, it wasn't because they needed something. It was because they wanted to talk. Those calls weren't frequent, but they were real. And I'd take one sincere phone call over 100 entitled requests. Looking back, the best Christmas of my life wasn't the one with the biggest cabin, the most expensive gifts, or the gourmet dinner. It was the quiet one in Vermont, a sleeping dog, a fireplace, and complete peace of mind. The one where I wasn't trying to earn approval. The one where nobody could blame me for the weather. Most people think generosity means saying yes forever. I've learned real generosity also requires boundaries. Because when kindness becomes an expectation, gratitude tends to disappear. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is step back and let people carry the responsibilities that were never yours to begin with. 6 o'clock didn't ruin Christmas. It simply revealed who thought Christmas belonged to me.